use this? Yeah. Shall we start then? Yeah, we're a good few minutes behind time, so let me welcome everybody, in particular those who have just rolled in now. I know some people with flights only came in now. So my job is a very simple one, provided my colleagues assist. I did tell the organizers I hate doing this job because often it tantamounts to being a policeman, which I hate doing, as I'm a victim of policemen also tell you order after 3 minutes. So I hate it when I have to do it to others. So let me start with myself. I've been given 5 minutes, colleagues. So I'm going to manage my time. And there it is. It's frozen. Here we are. By using the phone. Where is it now? My job is basically to introduce the topics, to tell you a bit about who's here. And so it is. I'll do that. Just 1 second. Here's the stopwatch going. OK, we start now. I've got 5 minutes. I've used up about 30 seconds already. So let me say for myself at least, this is an immensely, immensely important topic with huge, huge potential to assist us to deal with our developmental, economic growth, climate change, unemployment, and all of the other social and economic challenges we face. But yet at the same time, as we all know, the world has not for a very long time been as polarized in economic and political terms as now. So there it is, the first contradiction we have to deal with. If you look around, what are we talking about? Many of us, we mean different things maybe, but we're essentially talking about the increasing economic and trade fragmentation, the economic choices that countries are making which are unduly influenced by geopolitical considerations. I think many people now speak of an increasing deglobalization. So that's our first contradiction against which our speakers will speak. But there's a second one, I think. There are huge, huge opportunities, as I said, and no doubt our speakers will explain in greater detail. But there are certainly very huge risks. It depends how and in whose interests ultimately the opportunities that have arisen through digitalization are used. For there's a huge potential to deal with these problems, but at the same time a huge potential to make some of these problems worse, to increase the divides between those who are digitally connected and those who are not digitally connected, between the North and the South, between the urban and the rural in our communities or countries, between the elites and the masses. And so how do we take advantage of the digital opportunities in a way that serves everybody, but ultimately, primarily the poor, the marginalized, and the disadvantaged? And our speakers here are technical experts. I certainly am not, and they will deal with different aspects of it. So once again, I'm at 2 minutes and 14 seconds instead of my 5 minutes. So let's start with a huge round of applause to the moderator for using only half his time. So that's a sign. Let me hand over now to our first speaker. He is, of course, Thomas Mancini Grifoli. He's a deputy chief in the IMF's Monetary and Capital Markets Division with a focus on monetary policy, central banking, and fintech. He advised various country authorities and published on a very wide range of issues related to this work. Before this, he was a senior economist in research and monetary policy in the Swiss National Bank, and prior to that, he worked at Goldman Sachs and others in the private sector. I gather from the organizers that there's some changes in the biographies. It came too late to me. I haven't picked it up. But if I say anything wrong, hold the organizer responsible, because until an hour ago, this was the bio from which I drew. So really, what does it matter ultimately, as I always say? When people introduce me finally, I always say, hey, enough, enough. If people want to look me up these days, even on a simple Nokia phone, they can find what they want. What matters is not who I am and what qualifications I have. It's the substance of what I say. Having said that, it's 3 minutes and 22 seconds. I still have saved you 1.5 minutes. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. I had the honor of speaking to some of you at the World Bank last year and the year before, I believe. I thought it was just an incredibly rich conversation. I thought the questions that you asked were very informative, very useful for the IMF, for us to better understand the reality in your countries. And I hope that in exchange, we provided some thoughts that you took home and were able to do something with. It's especially a pleasure to speak to people who are able to change their countries, while the world itself is changing rapidly. And I'm going to say a few words about digital payments, an area of especially rapid change. And what I'd like to start by saying is that we believe at the IMF that there are three cornerstones of this transformation, and that is identity, payments, and data. These are three separate cornerstones that come together to really serve as the backbone for very significant gains, potentially, as well as risks, and I'll speak about that today. So many things that you might care about, improvements in healthcare, in financial inclusion, in disaster relief, et cetera, all of these must be tackled through a variety of legislations, but also through what we call a digital public infrastructure, which brings together identity, essentially individuals being able to establish and control their identity and their data. This has been done very successfully in India, for instance, with the Aadhaar project that is now available to 1.3 billion people, almost 100% of the adult population. The other aspect of the digital public infrastructure is payments, so individuals, businesses, and public agencies can transact immediately. This has been done very successfully in Brazil, for instance, with their fast payment system called Pix, which now touches about 80% of the adult population and 13 million businesses. The third aspect of this digital public infrastructure is data. And it's the public and private agents being able to securely share their data to facilitate transactions. A good example of this is Estonia's X-Road that allows for tax filing in under 5 minutes and business registration in under 3 hours. So these are all ways independently in which digitalization is helping. But when these things come together in a digital public infrastructure, when these things are done sequentially and intelligently, the implications for healthcare, female economic employment, increase innovation and competition can be significant. That's the main message. And today I'd like to focus a little bit on this middle part, which is payments. So the first thing to notice is that digital payments are increasing rapidly around the world. This chart here, which may be a little small, but this chart here shows two things. The first is these lines are increasing. What are these lines? These lines show mobile money account registration per 1,000 adults in low-income countries in red, middle-income countries in green, upper middle-income countries in purple. So all of these lines are increasing. The other thing to notice is these are money accounts per 1,000 adults, and there is a 1,000 line up there, which shows that in some countries there is more than one account registered per adult, which is really very, very substantial trend. Now, of course, you can also compare what is happening in developing countries to advanced economies. Now, of course, in advanced economies, most of the payments are already digital. You can see that about 100% of payments are already digital. It's a little different in developing countries, but the picture is encouraging. You see the same upward trend, and you see that the share in gray of transactions that are non-digital is decreasing over time. So digitalization is no longer the future. Digitalization is here. Digital payments are a reality in many countries around the world. Let me give you a concrete example of how digitalization in payments can help. So micro and small enterprises face multiple headwinds. Some of them have to do with high unit costs, high costs of servicing these entities, the scarcity of good collateral to pledge for credits, and incomplete financial data to be able to offer to banks and other financial institutions. And so in many countries, micro and small enterprises have a disadvantage. Now, digitalization is helping. The first way in which it can help is machine learning, real-time customer tracking, and data gathering are decreasing the problems having to do with incomplete information and scarcity of collateral. Firms are able to offer data in the place of collateral. They're able to show that they meet monthly payments on time in order to get credit at better rates. And so this is helping. The other thing that is helping is mobile service providers and financial services bundling with other types of services are decreasing the costs of reaching micro and small enterprises and allowing them to benefit from credit, allowing them to benefit from advice, financial advice, and helping them grow ultimately. And we know very well that digital financial inclusion, the number of these firms that have access to accounts, that have access to credit, thanks to these new innovations, is contributing very much to higher GDP in these countries. Very good. So what can the legislature do to help? So there are multiple areas. One is, of course, encourage building infrastructure. So digital identity, just as much as actual internet access. Countries where digital identities exist that allow households and firms to be onboarded more easily to countries have a clear advantage. And that is part of the infrastructure. It's not just the lines that you put into your countries. The second is this united public approach. And this is the idea of ensuring that things are done sequentially as a package. It's not just a matter of providing a piecemeal advantage here and there. It's really a matter of providing a package. So I was in Indonesia recently for the G20, and it's quite exceptional. When you go into a business, you can pay with your phone. So there are all sorts of steps that had to fall into place. The first one is the QR code standards that show up at the storefront that you can click to pay. The second is third-party wallet providers that allow you to control all of your accounts. That goes hand in hand with an open banking legislation in order to allow third-party wallets to activate and speak to bank accounts. And then, of course, these payments are done immediately thanks to the fast payment infrastructure put in place by the central bank, et cetera, et cetera. So you get the idea that it's not just one change, not two changes, but a package. And when the package works together, things are much more efficient. Third, the state's role in the payment market. This is very, very important. There's lots of discussions around the world, and I'm sure we'll speak more about the role of the state, whether it is just providing sound regulation, sound rules of the game, sound infrastructure, or is it also a more active role in providing central bank digital currencies, for instance, or fast payment systems? That is an important debate that we can discuss together. And lastly, of course, the regulatory and legal frameworks. But the regulatory and legal frameworks don't just fall out of the sky. They come from you, from the laws that you put in place. We see a very clear example in the US right now where the Congress is legislating on new laws that will underpin the regulation for payment service providers, et cetera, et cetera. There are some countries that are very much at the forefront: Singapore, Japan, Switzerland, others as well, that have put into place legislation which has given rise to new regulation, which has given rise to new innovation. So there are good examples of that around the world. And the last thing I'll say is that, of course, challenges remain. There are social challenges having to do with the acceptance of new payment providers that have to do with consumer protection and building trust. There are economic and financial challenges domestically that have to do with competition. Great, we have new players, we have innovation, but do they control the entire market, or are we able to still put in place enough competition? Are we able to provide credit to the new entities, households, and firms that have been included, or just payments? Can we migrate? Can we go up the food chain and provide credit and financial advice, not just payment services? And then globally, we worry about digital divide between countries that are able to leverage and regulate new innovation, and countries that are not. And so I think the IMF plays an important role, and I'll just end with this, in providing policy advice to countries, yes, of course, in providing financial assistance to countries, hopefully not too much, but especially in providing capacity development. We have a very large program of serving your countries with capacity development, coming to work with your central banks, your ministries of finance, your statistical offices, in order to create the environment that will then lead to innovation and leverage the benefits while minimizing the risks. So we are here to help. Very happy to be among you today. Thank you very much, and happy to engage in discussion with you later.
Thank you very much, Tommaso. That was a very good start. The next speaker is Mohamed Chowki. He's a deputy in the House of Representatives here in Morocco and chairs the Finance and Economic Development Committee. He's engaged actively with the IMF on finance and economic issues affecting Morocco, and he has studied business admin and is an alumnus of the School of Business Admin. For more, you can look at the reference in the bio. Thank you very much, Mohamed. Over to you. 7 minutes. The idea is, of course, to encourage discussion, so that we get responses to what you say as well. 7 minutes.
Distinguished members of the Parliamentary Network, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank the organizers, especially the president of the Parliamentary Network on the World Bank and the IMF, Mr. Liam Byrne, for inviting me to participate in this session. It is actually a real pleasure to welcome you all in the name of my Moroccan colleagues in this beautiful and resilient city of Marrakesh, to speak alongside the panelists on the impact of the digital opportunity in our economics. And I'm very glad to present insights on the Moroccan e-nation experience from a parliamentary political perspective. Pieces of legislation that come and influence digital transformation came in Morocco from the different government components: monarchy, government, parliament. Let's start by the monarchy. His Majesty the King Mohammed's 6 speeches and instructions have repeatedly insisted on the need to make digital transition a catalyst to the country development, to use digital technologies to increase efficiency of the economy, and to improve the accessibility to all citizens. His Majesty tasked in 2020 a special consultative commission to outline a new development model. Their report came in 2021 and identified 4 major challenges in this area. 1, swiftly upgrade the digital infrastructure. 2, upgrade broadband high-speed and very high-speed connection throughout the country. 3, train sufficient number of skills to support this digital transformation. Actually, this is exactly what the World Bank and IMF are tackling here with the new jobs and the new industries of the futures and the reskilling of workers. 4th, complete the legal, legislative, and interoperability frameworks. This digital transformation has been influenced, although partially, at least the last 2 or 3 governmental programs presented by the Moroccan governments to the vote of confidence in the parliament. And it was always since then considered among the main levers for the growth of the economy. Moroccan legislators voted a law regarding access to public data, one of the policies areas of the Open Government Partnership. By the way, we hosted the Open Government Partnership meetings for Africa and the Middle East here in Marrakesh in last November. Moroccan legislators voted a law establishing an agency responsible for implementing the government strategy in digital transformation. Moroccan legislators also voted finance bills since 2021 that are digital transformation friendly and in which they allocated resources to support the government transition to a true e-nation. Moroccan legislators brought amendments into the decree of public procurement incorporating new digital requirements such as reverse electronic auctions, electronic transmission, and electronic databases. And finally, Moroccan legislators voted a law aiming at speeding administrative processes. So where did Morocco succeed? I think we succeeded first in putting together this comprehensive and resilient regulatory environment, ensuring easy access to digitalizations. Morocco also succeeded in digitally simplifying and clarifying procedures. 22 administrative decisions had been simplified and digitized. 45% of the documents requested in new investment setup have been waived out. This all in convergence with the new investment charter that the Moroccan parliament voted last year. Another very good example of success in digital transformation is the Moroccan tax administration. Not only taxpayers are able to digitally file their tax return, they have been paying them exclusively online for quite some time now. Today, fiscally, Morocco is doing better in terms of revenues, partially, of course, because Morocco is growing economically, but also because there is more efficiency, more simplification, more trust, and more dematerialization resulting from the digital transformation. So the conclusion, more digitalization means more fiscal revenues. I want to tell you here a story from the 2023 finance bill debate that we had in the parliament last year. The Moroccan government was budgeting $6.2 billion in corporate profit tax revenues. That's unchanged compared to 2022, which was a record year after a 7 or 8% growth recovery in 21. So I was like, this can't be possible. Government is mistaken. So I couldn't say it out loud. I am part of the ruling majority. So I whispered to the budget minister next to me, "You're wrong, man. Can't be. You're too optimistic." He goes, "No, you'll see." Well, guess what? They are on track and doing better than their budget in a very, very moderate growth year. So I think this is coming from more efficiencies. So before I conclude, let me share a couple of ideas on financial inclusion digital currencies in Morocco. The government is implementing its strategy on financial inclusion, seeking to serve target populations. These target populations are women, of course, young people, and micro enterprises, of course, with their rural residents. The main pillar of this strategy is the intense use of new information technologies with the contribution, of course, of the central bank, the local commercial banks, the telecom operators, and the telecom regulators. To support Morocco in this process, the World Bank, for this process of financial inclusion, of course, the World Bank respectively approved in 2020 and in 2021, $500 million and $450 million financial and digital inclusion development policy financing program. I think I'll end here and I have things to say, or maybe one last word. We're doing behind the developed world in terms of digital currencies, but we're also doing behind compared to other developing countries like Central Africa or Salvador that were bold enough to adopt a digital currency as their official currency. I think I'm going to leave it here to respect my time, and I'm happy to engage with you in the debate. Thank you.
Mohammed is exactly 7 minutes, by the way. Now we have Nima Lungagira, who actually is very interesting. She's an MP representing NGOs in Parliament. I really like that. I've never heard of that. I like the idea, although most people who become MPs from the NGOs then get co-opted into being MPs rather more than NGO actors. But she isn't. She's actually serving at several NGOs. She continues to do so. And she's International Parliamentary Network for Education. She's involved in agriculture and related NGOs. She chairs in Tanzania the Committee for Foreign Affairs, Defense and Security. And welcome. I haven't heard of any other parliament that has this. Welcome. It's very nice. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So, as introduced, I'm Nema Lugangira, Member of Parliament from Tanzania. And I'll just start with where he ended. So in Tanzania, we have our ruling party, Chama cha Mapinduzi, and our party recognized special groups. And in efforts of increasing women representation in parliament, we have special seats. So our party, CCM, has divided the special seats it gets to different key stakeholder groups. So we have youth, people with disability, higher education, workforce, and NGOs. So this is a unique process that our party has done, which is why our party, CCM, continues to be the leading and strongest party in Tanzania. So back to business. First of all, I bring to you greetings and condolences from Tanzania, from our speaker, Right Honorable Dr. Tulia Ackson, our president, Her Excellency President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan. And I would like all of you to recognize that for the first time with us here today, we have our parliamentary chair for the Finance Budget Committee in the House. If you can stand up so that they can all know you. So thank you. So I'm very quickly going to touch on two areas, economies and taxation. And when we're talking about economies, definitely we all know that digital economy, it creates opportunities to expand business, to get access to markets, reduce poverty. And we've seen during COVID-19, there's opportunities for online education courses, e-commerce, use of social media, video conferencing, etc. So the digital brings a lot of opportunities for economies. However, for us to truly achieve the opportunities that come with digital economies, we need to look at issues of accessibility of internet, reliable and affordable and meaningful connectivity, government infrastructure, that is public infrastructure for the internet, digital skills for the workforce. But we also need to recognize the differences and needs between urban versus urban, rural, and peripheral regions. So just very quickly, I'll touch on, our colleague from IMF spoke about digital payments. This is a great revolution, but in developing countries like Tanzania, we're still doing mobile money banking. And when you're talking about digital payments, a large percentage of our SMEs are still informal. So if we truly want to take advantage of digital payments, digital economy, digital transformation, we need to have strategic efforts to formalize our informal sector. That's number one. But number two, the authenticity of payments. How are people going to trust making payments online? How do you then know when someone is doing fraud and things like that? That is also something that needs to be taken into account. And then the other issue is taxation. As we all know, in most of our countries, we have the consumption taxes, which is the value-added tax, VAT. But with the digital sector, it's bringing about a new dimension of taxation. Usually, tax is only being considered that if it's corporate tax, it has to be done where the country's office is, the location of the country. But with the digital transformation economies, this is changing. So the IMF, World Bank, and other organizations need to support to making sure that we have new definitions so that there can be taxation. There are issues of digital service tax. There are issues of digital businesses, online businesses. If I talk about online businesses, most of our countries, we have physical businesses where they have a shop. I can give an example in Tanzania. If you have a business and you reach equivalent to Tanzanian shillings 4 million per year for your revenue, you have to pay tax. But now for an online business who reaches the same level of revenue is not mandated to pay tax. Should that be allowed? Should that be the case? These are difficult conversations, but we need to have. Our governments and our countries need to widen the tax base, and if every other sector is being taxed, then so should the digital sector. But how do we do it? So these are discussions that we really need to look at. And just before I conclude, I would like to touch on artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence brings about huge opportunities for accelerating digital development and economies. However, there are two sides of artificial intelligence. If we look at artificial intelligence and taxation, artificial intelligence can be a tool to commit crime. How can it be a tool to commit crime? Because AI, people who want to do crime can use AI to create false documents, false identities, and submit payments, invoices, and get false payments. But on the other hand, AI can be potentially used also to combat tax fraud. So all of these things bring us to the point where we need to have a clear and robust regulatory framework. And at the moment, most of Global South countries do not have a clear and robust regulatory framework for this digital transformation in our economies. So what I would like to ask World Bank, IMF, and all other developing financing organizations is to strategically make efforts to ensure that our countries don't remain to be taken advantage of by the global north tech companies who are continuously taking advantage of the fact that we have loopholes in our regulatory frameworks. A quick example is on data. A lot of data is being collected freely from Africa, for example. And tech companies are using this data and monetizing from this data. But when our governments want access to this very same data that has been extracted from our countries for free, our governments have to pay for that data. Now, is that right? That's not right. But coming from countries where we are from a lower economy, we're not able to truly negotiate or mandate with our counterparts. Now, to conclude, because I just have 1 minute, I'm just going to share what Tanzania is doing. So under our president, Her Excellency President Dr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, Tanzania has made efforts of coming up with a Digital Tanzania project whereby it's being supported by the World Bank. And very recently, the government has signed subsidies with telecom companies to making sure that they strengthen and build new towers. More than 750 new towers are going to be built for urban and rural connectivity, as well as strengthening other towers. And very recently, our president launched the 45,000 kilometers of 2A Africa subsea cable, which interconnects Europe, Asia, Africa, etc. So all in all, for many of these things to happen, we need political will. And for political will to be attained, we need to engage parliamentarians, which is why I continue to commend the World Bank and IMF for having the parliamentary network on the World Bank and IMF. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Nima. Now our final speaker is Julio Centemero, President of the Second Standing Committee on Socio-Economic and Environmental Affairs in the Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean. He's a chartered accountant by profession and a statutory auditor. He serves on the executive of the International Parliamentary Network for Education, and he's a president of the Intergroup of Friendship, Italy, Armenia. He's published a lot on fintech and capital markets. Over to you. And then we throw it open, and then we give the speakers, of course, 2 minutes each to reply. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon. First of all, let me express my condolences to the victims of the terrible earthquake that hit Morocco 1 month ago. And then I have to say that I'm very happy that this panel has a nice title as Digital Opportunity. And I would like to focus on the word opportunity, because often when we think about future digitalization technology, we look at this phenomena as if we are living in a book of George Orwell or Aldous Huxley. Instead, switching to Isaac Asimov, we know that robots don't kill humans. Only humans can decide to kill humans. And with AI, like my colleague from Tanzania was saying earlier, this debate got huge. There's a huge debate about ethics. There's a huge debate about rules. For example, in the European Union, we will see, I think before EU elections, the green light for an AI Act. And there's a huge debate about jobs, job losses. But are we sure that innovation causes job losses? Well, if we look at economic history, the answer is the opposite. And it is the mismatch between offer and demand caused by the inefficiencies of our education system that is causing a loss of job opportunities. For example, taking my country as an example, PwC data says that in Italy in 2022, a mismatch between demand and offer amounted at some 40%. It means a loss of 38 billion euros. Since the start of the pandemic, it was clear to all of us that the past economic models were no longer fit to grasp the complexity of a period in which, for example, supply chains were disrupted also as a consequence of wars. Fintech solutions, like Mr. Mancini Grifoli was saying, among others, grew at a fast pace, bringing financial services also to remote areas, even in European countries where state budgets were cut. The solution to bring banking services to remote areas such as mountains and islands was fintech. And also, fintech brought financial services to people who were excluded by the financial systems, and from this, the point of identity is fundamental. And also, connecting the dot with my colleague from Tanzania, well, thanks to fintech, we can create policies of digital identity in order to create trust about payments and more. As lawmakers, we should ask ourselves how to regulate this global phenomenon, because, of course, I come from a country belonging to EU. We can regulate phenomena in a large group of countries, but still, these are global phenomena. And for example, as Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, we shared with the UN Secretary General the need of a new Bretton Woods to keep up with the pace of the new challenges we are facing in finance, technology, monetary policies, and AI. And in order to do so, as a Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean, we created two platforms. The Startup Market of the Mediterranean, in which we discuss about entrepreneurship, about technology, in which we exchange best law-making practices such as regulatory sandboxes. Regulatory sandboxes can be the solution of keeping the law and the bureaucracy at the pace of civil society and businesses. And we created another platform, and the event of this other platform will be held here in Marrakesh mid-December. We created the Mediterranean Economic Parliamentary Forum, where we will analyze all the phenomena we mentioned above, with a stress on entrepreneurship and energy this year, because we choose themes every year. Why? Because as a public enemy, the hip-hop group used to say, don't believe the hype. Instead, do what our colleague from Tonga said before, choose data in order to make data-driven policies. Thank you.
Colleagues, can we start with the questions, please? We have about half an hour, and we've got to give the speakers a chance to reply as well. So can I just raise one thing, though? There are the three components, right? Economies, currencies, and taxes. Very, very little has been, very little. I don't even recognize this music. And where has it come from? Can somebody just help me with this? I don't know how this is. It's probably my son's. I'm not sure how that's got there. That's not my music. I like soul and jazz. I don't know where it comes from. So here we are. Look, we got about half an hour. Thanks so much. We got 8 minutes or so for our speakers. So if somebody has raised on taxes, that'll be great. Okay, I can't see very well. The country is Mexico, is it? Yes, it's Mexico, Guinea, and then if you put your Cote d'Ivoire, and then I see one hand up there. The gentleman, 4. Right, 5, is there a hand there? No. So there's 4 only. All right, 2 minutes each then, unless the other hand's up. You see, I'll distribute the time according to the number of people who got questions. 5. So you know your numbering, right? Shall we go for it? I won't be intervening unless you exceed 2 minutes, okay? So you know the order. I've taken you into account, sir. Is there somebody else? Yeah, I've taken you into account, sorry, yeah. Okay, so you know the numbering, right? Mexico, we're starting with you. You're number 1, Mexico. Okay, maybe I should just wait here and guide it. You're on, thank you.
Hola, muy buenas tardes. Yo voy a hablar en español, soy de México, legisladora del Congreso Federal. Nada más decirles que en la cuestión de lo que acaban de decir, identidad, pago y datos, primero, ¿quién debe de gobernar? ¿El Estado o las empresas sobre ese tipo de conocimiento? Después, en México estamos nosotros creando la ley de ciberseguridad, que es muy importante. Tenemos que legislar nosotros como diputados sobre el término de ciberseguridad, checar lo que es la ciberdelincuencia y legislar también sobre la inteligencia digital en todos los niveles educativos. Entonces, mi pregunta es, ¿quién debería de estar al frente de un instituto o de algo de ciberseguridad? En México lo estamos nosotros legislando en parte a iniciativa privada o del gobierno, porque si es de parte del gobierno vamos a depender de qué tipo de partido es el que esté gobernando, pues para que haga ese tipo de políticas de ciberseguridad. Entonces mi pregunta es, de acuerdo con la opinión de ustedes, ¿quién debería de estar al frente o debe de ser un instituto independiente de las cuestiones de ciberseguridad cuando se creen en los estados? Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Number 2.
Ok, merci beaucoup. Les avantages du numérique sur nos vies au quotidien sont incontestables. Nous, actuellement en Guinée, nous nous acheminons vers la numérisation des données personnelles. Le Parlement guinéen est même en train de travailler sur une loi portant identification des personnes physiques dont l'objectif est la numérisation des données personnelles de toute la population. Mais en tant que parlementaires, nous nous posons des questions. Certains sont réticents parce que la numérisation n'est pas sans conséquences. Nous nous inquiétons par rapport à la sécurisation des données personnelles avec les risques que cela peut engendrer, parce qu'on voit souvent avec les transactions financières, les achats en ligne et autres, nos concitoyens sont souvent victimes de piratage et autres. Donc, qu'est-ce que vous nous conseillez en tant que parlementaire? Parce que, comme je vous l'ai dit, cette loi est en examen actuellement au Parlement. Et donc, j'aimerais vraiment vous écouter sur cette question liée à la sécurisation des données personnelles. Je vous remercie.
Number 3, please.
Muchas
Alors, moi,
gracias. Soy el
Number
señor.
3 is there in the back, sorry. We'll come to you.
C'est moi.
Doesn't matter. Okay, you can go now, he can go later. It makes no difference. Doesn't make, okay, go ahead. Go ahead, Morishana. Go ahead.
Muchas gracias. Voy a hablar en español. Soy el señor Ebemba. Soy
Going to.
senador de la República de Guinea Ecuatorial. He seguido con mucha atención el debate sobre la digitalización, pero al final, hablando de la divisa digital, me ha llamado la atención el hecho de decir que hay países como el caso de los hermanos de Salvador que han elegido esta divisa, pero yo no sé muy bien cuál ha sido el resultado, porque sé también que hay otros países como el caso de Centroáfrica, que me es más cercano, pero que los resultados no fueron buenos, entre otras cosas porque hay muchas limitaciones, caso de Internet, caso de infraestructura de comunicación. Entonces, yo me hubiera gustado saber un poco cuál fue el resultado de esta elección de divisa digital de El Salvador. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Mauritania? Can you go, sir?
Brittany, oui, c'est bien ça. Alors moi, j'ai d'abord un constat, et puis un vœu et probablement une question. Le constat, c'est que dans mon pays, la transition numérique, surtout dans le domaine des bancaires, est allée plus vite que l'aspect institutionnel. Tant et si bien qu'on s'est retrouvé avec une situation où le législateur n'a pas émis des lois pour accompagner le flux de développement des transactions bancaires numériques. Et donc ça, c'est un problème où il faut vraiment prendre conscience de ce fait et aider probablement notre législateur à s'entourer des précautions qu'il faut pour accompagner cette vague de transfert, de développement numérique bancaire surtout. Alors le deuxième point, c'est au niveau de la sécurité. Il existe effectivement une loi sur la cybersécurité. Il existe effectivement une loi sur la cybersécurité, mais je ne suis pas très sûr que sur le plan technique, il y ait une infrastructure de sécurité suffisante pour sécuriser tout ce flot de données auquel on ne s'est pas tout à fait préparé. Donc ça aussi, c'est un deuxième problème.
Thank you.
Je ne peux pas poser ma question?
Thank you. Sorry, we're running out of time, with due respect.
Okay, d'accord.
Yeah, we can come back to you. There's a final question there, and then we're going to ask them to speak in reverse order. I'm in the hands of the organizers. Yeah. Okay. Oh, sorry, there was a question there. Go ahead, please.
Oui,
and then there's one there. Was it right? There was somebody on that side? No. Okay, well, it's just you then.
Merci. Moi, je souhaiterais poser ma question à M. Tommaso. Voilà. Je souhaiterais que vous reveniez sur les stratégies à mettre en place sur le continent africain pour tirer profit de cette nouvelle opportunité qu'est le numérique. Quel pourrait être l'apport des parlementaires dans cette initiative? Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much. Mr. Centemero, do you want to come in now? 2 minutes, please, and then we're done.
Yeah. Okay, so I start by Mexico. Who regulates cybersecurity? Okay, in my opinion, in my experience, for example, in European countries, there are independent agencies. Okay, so they are like surveillance bodies, like the central bank is a surveillance body for finance and banking. In this case, they have surveillance over cybersecurity process. Then from Guinea, how to safeguard the personal data? Well, adopting a law that I think it's been adopted also in the USA, but as, again, European origin, is a GDPR, and there are also agencies keeping track of what companies are doing with the data collected. Then, Tropical Guinea, asking about the adoption of Bitcoin in El Salvador. Basically, the purpose of adopting the Bitcoin in Salvador, I was talking to the Italian ambassador at that time, was to attract foreign investments because the currency used in Salvador was not strong enough. Did they succeed? I personally don't know, but I don't see at cryptocurrencies or crypto assets as evil because they do exist. Nowadays, they are used by some traders, a lot of traders, especially young people. They are used also in real economy, especially in a situation of crisis like Lebanon. There was a problem with the Lebanese currency. No one could withdraw dollars or even Lebanese currencies for a long time. So people started using cryptocurrencies, especially the ones connected with a fixed exchange to the dollars, called stable coins. Then Mauritania, digitalization is faster than legislation, lawmaking. Yes, that's a situation, especially in all the countries in a civil law. The common law countries, they're going a bit faster. This is why we created, this is the first case of
of Italy, a regulatory sandbox for fintech and insurtech, which is an experimental environment composed by the involved ministries and the relevant authorities. And for a period of 18 months, they checked all the requirements, all the needs of new businesses, startups, new services, in order then to regulate the reality of facts. And for example, there's a regulatory sandbox on AI in Spain, and more are being created in Europe, although in the UK, in India, and the USA, there were already a lot of regulatory sandboxes. So I think this is the way to regulate new kind of phenomena. That's it.
Thank you very much. For me, very quickly, I would like to talk about the issue of data protection. For the cases of our countries that are coming from Africa, there is the Africa Union Malabo Declaration on cybersecurity and personal data protection, which is something I think you can go through because it clearly outlines the issues of personal data protection. However, it took more than 8 years for countries to ratify the Malabo Declaration, and it only got ratified, I think, last year. So that is something that you can look at. The other issue, very quickly, is the comment on Mauritania. I think there is an opportunity, and here we can ask IMF, because one of the 3 pillars that IMF is focusing on is capacity building. So I think there's also an opportunity and need for capacity building for members of parliament, especially on this matter of digital economies, because this is a new area and most parliamentarians are not very conversant with it. And most of the digital development discussions are done in exclusion of parliamentarians. It's just the tech companies. So maybe that's another area where you can also try to look at for the capacity building. And finally, I'll just touch on EU, for example. The EU Parliament is currently discussing and almost finalizing an Artificial Intelligence Act, EU AI Act, which will also have an impact even beyond EU jurisdiction. So one of the things that as a member of parliament coming from Global South, I think it's important for when EU, US, Canada, and other Global North countries are coming up with legislation that has an impact beyond the jurisdiction, to also remember to engage members of parliament from the Global South, because it becomes, it's a huge gap. Like right now, the EU is pushing for signing post-Cotonou agreements, and when this is signed, it means automatically the EU will have authority over all ACP countries, which includes African countries. But as African MPs, we're not in those discussions at all. So that is another thing that I think it's very important to make sure that there is inclusion so that those decisions do not end up impacting us. Thank you.
Thank you. The lady from Mexico who addressed cybersecurity and the arbitrage between private sector and the public sector. I think it's a matter of, there are different models. We've seen continental Europe where there's a lot of public or state-owned cybersecurity companies, or the things, or the likes of Israel, where you have strong, very, very innovative cybersecurity companies that private that working for the government. Pour l'honorable qui a parlé de la protection des données à caractère personnel, je pense qu'il faut un arsenal juridique complet. Hein. Le Maroc, je vais partager avec vous l'expérience du Maroc. D'abord, sur la Constitution marocaine, l'article 24 spécifie que les données à caractère doivent être protégées. Après, il y a une loi qui bien sûr, relative à la protection des personnes physiques à l'égard des traitements de leurs données personnelles. Et après, on a différents décrets et notamment un décret qui installe une commission nationale à cet égard. I just want to talk about El Salvador's success with the digital currency, with Bitcoin. I think I can't assess the success or no, but at least this country was able to raise $500 million in a capital markets bond in Bitcoin. So for me, that's a tremendous success. I think that's it for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So I'll just focus on adding at the margin because colleagues here on the panel provided some very insightful answers. I think there was a question and a comment about taxation policies and whether the introduction of new digital means of payments are actually a detriment to taxation. Well, in general, not so much. The idea is that if digitalization is done well, it can actually decrease the costs of complying with tax laws, and it can increase the benefits from doing so. It can increase the benefits from generating data that was not generated in the informal economy, and with that data, have access to credit and financial services. So there's actually a plus. There's an incentive that is important, I think. In terms of privacy and security of data, there is, of course, a technical question about where data is stored and how that can be done safely. There are also important questions, though, having to do with access. And specifically, the access that the government can have to this data. This debate is becoming very prominent around central bank digital currencies. There are multiple reasons why central banks may want to introduce digital currencies, but does that mean then that the state has information on people's transactions, and does that mean that the state can decide to block certain transactions? Certainly, if that was the case, the take-up, the adoption of central bank digital currency would be low. And I think central banks are thinking very hard about how to limit the access of state agents, of governments, to this data. And colleagues have already spoken about this, but I'd like to add that technology can also help. So, for instance, in the case of central bank digital currencies, there are countries looking at the ability of leveraging technology to convince people that the state cannot have information. For instance, transactions can be associated with random numbers as opposed to well-known wallet addresses, so that the central bank, at least, cannot be in a position to reconstruct a transaction from A to Z. So there's interesting roles for technology as well in how to maintain privacy. I'd like to say, though, that on El Salvador, the IMF's view has been relatively negative for two specific reasons. First, adopting a crypto asset as legal tender basically amounts to adopting a foreign currency as legal tender, thus losing the ability to influence the economy through monetary policy and other means. That's a huge loss. The other is that adopting a currency specifically, such as Bitcoin, which is very unstable, introduces enormous risks to a country's economy, enormous risks to fiscal revenue, and is certainly something that the IMF would not recommend. And I'd like to be very specific here and to say that everything I've said about adopting digital means of payments does not equate to adopting crypto assets. What I was talking about before is the digitalization of bank accounts, is the provision of fast payment services so that payments can be settled immediately between people, is perhaps even the adoption of a central bank digital currency, but is not the adoption of an unbacked crypto asset whose value is fundamentally unstable. So that I would like to make very clear. Finally, there was just a question from Côte d'Ivoire on what parliamentarians can do. And we spoke a little bit about this, about the importance of passing laws to underpin regulation, the importance of establishing infrastructure, the importance of acting as a catalyst so that these reforms can be done in a package deal, as I was suggesting earlier, not in a piecemeal fashion. The importance of favoring a dialogue with the central bank that can be an important agent in pushing for some of these transformations, but of course, only after a dialogue with the government. And I think importantly, one last thing to add is the cross-border aspect. And here you are all in the same room. It's a wonderful opportunity to speak together about cross-border payments because this is what will increase your company's access to foreign markets. It's not just a matter of making payments work domestically. It's important to make them work across border as well, and there's an opportunity to do so with digital payments. So thank you very much for your attention. I'll stick around if there are any other questions afterwards. Thanks for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you very much. It's on that note that we end, that we as members of Parliament have a very urgent obligation to take these issues forward. Ultimately, the test or the value of this session is not what we say or what we learn here, it's what we actually do as legislators. And in many ways, I think that the opportunities, we can only exploit them digitally, are more for us in the developing world than for the developed world. But we have to reduce the gap between the two. So firstly, thank you very, very much, especially for the level of cooperation. I must say, can you clap them? Almost all of them observe their time. And it's very rare that in a panel of 4 that you actually see that. And don't forget the chairperson. I've stuck to my time, and I'm saving more time. Now, I'm not summarizing it with my inane comments. I think we all know what we have to do. But can I suggest to the organizers that this theme be carried over into April next year and so on? It is too big a theme. But let's not start again. Start from where we left off now. The organizers look at the notes, look at the themes that emerge here, and then structure the next session on this next year as a developmental thing, not starting the whole story again. Thank you once again for an excellent team of panelists, and thank you for being a wonderful audience. Thank you indeed.